Welcome to the World Class Speaking podcast series. This is a place where you will learn how to present, persuade, and profit by improving your communication skills. Each episode in the series is a chapter from the book World Class Speaking in Action. And each chapter is written by a certified world class speaking coach. I'm your host, Matt Miller, and I've carefully crafted and summarized each chapter in the book. Do you want to captivate your audience right from the start of your speech? Are you sick and tired of boring presentations that you struggle to get through? Have you ever felt inspired and motivated after listening to a great speech, presentation, or even a conversation? Me too. And in this episode, you will learn the 3 best practices to open your speech that will grab your audience's attention. This is episode 5, the ABCs for your bang beginning. It's by Tracey. And Tracey is a certified world-class speaking coach, a keynote speaker, and also a teacher where he teaches his clients techniques for effectively speaking in sales, but also develop the confidence and mindset for his clients to reach their goals. It's important to master the beginning of your speech because this is what sets the tone for the remainder of it. Data supports that the audience will determine whether or not they like you within the first 7 seconds of a speech, and they will also determine if they even want to continue listening to you after their opinion is formed in the first 30 seconds. Therefore, we must captivate our audience with our very first words. Have you ever read the first few pages of a book and you got nothing out of it, no value? How did you feel? Did you want to continue, or did you just want to shut the book and move on? Well, this is how the audience is going to feel if you start your speech boring. They're going to want to shut you off and move on. Therefore, the very first words out of your mouth for a speech should be one or more of the ABCs. And ABCs is an acronym for asking an awesome question, a big bang statement, and creating a compelling story. Asking a question, big bang statement, compelling story, ABCs. First, asking a question. Something that you can do is start off your speech by saying, by a raise of hands, how many of you have ever experienced a gut-wrenching fear in the last 3 weeks? That'll get your audience thinking. Now, a couple things when you ask a question. Number 1 is you want to cast a wide enough net. A bad question would be, how many of you had a cup of coffee this morning? Because it's hit or miss. You could have the majority of your audience, but again, a lot of them might not be coffee drinkers, and then you're not going to resonate with them at all. You want to engage your entire audience. And you can do this with the following techniques. You can start with, have you ever? Have you ever had a great cup of coffee? Well, at that point, almost everybody's going to raise their hand. That will most likely engage the entire audience if you start with, have you ever? So I opened this episode with a series of 3 questions. Let's revisit those 3 opening questions. I first said, do you want to captivate your audience right from the start of your speech? Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast series, that's something that you want to do. So you can virtually raise your hands. Then I said, are you sick and tired of boring presentations that you struggle to get through? Again, good chances that you answer yes to that question as well. Then my third question was, have you ever felt inspired or motivated after listening to a great speech, presentation, or conversation? And I started with have you ever, and chances are the majority of the people listening have. So this passes the cast a wide net test. It also showcases that starting with have you ever can be effective. After you cast a wide enough net, the second thing you want to do is make sure that it's actually a question. A lot of people struggle with this. You want it to be self-explanatory. You want it to be clear, concise, don't create confusion. And it should actually be a question, not something like, by a show of hands, in nature, the best animal is the lion because of XYZ. That's not a question. You want to make sure that you're actually invoking thought in your audience and having them answer by either saying something out loud, raising their hand, or giving some kind of cue. And the third thing when it comes to asking a question is you want to give your audience time to answer the question itself. And a lot of people say, how long should I ask the question for? And then how long should I give the audience to raise their hand or make a decision? And the answer is really as long as it takes. If it's a more in depth question, it might take your audience 10, 15 seconds to formulate an answer before raising their hands. But if it's something very obvious and simple, chances are they can even raise their hand before you're done speaking. But you want to give them enough time so that they actually can formulate a thought and answer that question. Sometimes it might take a minute. Sometimes you might have to have them close their eyes and reflect. But it's very important that you don't want to interrupt your audience's thinking. If you interrupt your audience's thinking, number one, they're going to get aggravated, but at the same time, they're going to not get the most out of the remainder of your speech because you didn't let them plant the seed for what was to come next. And then after you ask a question or the A, the B is the big bang statement. You want to start with a big bang, and the goal should be to be unexpected. You can start with singing. If you start singing, even if you're a good or a bad singer, you're going to captivate your audience regardless. Another example could be a bold statement. Another example could be a prop or to be unexpected. I watched this speech, I think it was a Toastmasters competition, and the person that was giving the speech started with their back towards the audience and started their speech saying, "Never turn your back to the audience." And then he turned back around. For me, I remember that. It was memorable. He started off with a big bang, and I could visually see him starting with his back towards the audience. Then when he turned around, it fit the rest of his speech. So that was very powerful. You just want to be memorable. And then the A, B, and now the C is create a compelling story. A key distinction here is that you don't want to talk at your audience or to your audience, but rather you want to speak with your audience. You want it to be more of a conversation, a flow. And the goal is to have a conversation, and you want to be able to relive your experience. That means when you're creating this compelling story, you want to relive in detail what you went through. What are the five senses? What did you smell? What did you feel? What did you hear? Think about all those sensory details and incorporate it into that story. And chances are you're going to paint that creative picture for your audience to remember. And why not start with a great story that sets up the rest of your presentation? That can be very powerful. Some other things that you can do when you're giving a story is that you can use dialogue. And this is something that I recently learned that I thought was very powerful. Here's an example of using dialogue. I was walking my dog at my house several months ago, true story. And my cousin, their family lives just 3 houses down from me. I was walking my dog, and then my aunt comes out, and we start having a conversation. And we start talking about something that somebody that she knows is struggling with. And we started talking, and then she said something that resonated with me and that I remember to this day. And she said, always consider the feedback from other people that you feel close to and that you know and you trust. But at the end of the day, you need to make your own decision. And that was powerful because that resonated with me. Whenever I make a decision, sure, I'm going to consider what my family thinks. I'm going to consider what my friends think. But at the end of the day, it's my life and I have to be able to make that decision. But if you notice what I did there is instead of saying, I was walking my dog down the street and I noticed that I need to make my own decision, but also consider the opinions of others. I didn't say it like that. I said, I gave my aunt the most important line in that story. And what it does is I gave her the wisdom, so it pointed the attention off of me, which makes me less egotistical, if some people might view it that way. But I'm also giving them the best lines in the story. And when you give your characters the best line of your story, it seems to resonate most with them. And that's an example of using dialogue in a story. Another thing to consider when you're giving a story is you want to invite your audience into the story. And what I mean by this is the following example, and this is from the book, a direct quote. If you had been standing on the side of the road in Elmira, you would have seen me and my 9-year-old son driving towards you. So what that does is it invites you into the story. And here's an example that I thought of. If you were guarding me in the fourth quarter of a championship game, you have been hoping and praying that I didn't get the ball, because if I did, it was going in the hoop. But on the other end, if I was defending you, you would have had a field day as well. My defense is horrible. And what that does is it invites you into the story, guarding me in the fourth quarter of the game, and it paints the picture in the audience's mind. And I share about myself, I create engagement and excitement with the audience. And this can really set up the rest of your presentation, because throughout the rest of the presentation, I can call back to that basketball game. I can reference it, and that can be very powerful. Another example is if you would have been driving past my apartment complex at 12 o'clock on that sunny Sunday afternoon, you would have seen my neighbor struggling to move in her large brown couch into her apartment complex. The couch is so big that you could have laid down on it, stretched out with your arms, and still had several feet of clearance. In that story, I invite you into it. To recap, the 3 ways to capture your audience's attention is using the ABCs. So A is for asking an awesome question. You want to know your audience and engage everybody, cast a wide net. B is for a big bang statement. So you want to make a big promise or a bold statement. And you can do this by singing, by using a prop, by making some controversial statement in the right context that's memorable. And then C is for creating a compelling story. So invite the audience into your story. That'll cause that engagement, and it will allow you to resonate with the audience further down in the speech as well, because you can call back to that story. Now that you know the importance of starting your next speech or presentation with excitement, think of a question that you can ask your audience. Make sure it casts a wide net, and that it's also a question, and that it's concise and clear. A practical tip is you can start with, have you ever? But think of that question that will engage your audience. And then in the next episode, you will learn the most neglected part of the speech, which is transitions. That's all we've got for this episode on the World Class Speaking podcast series. Until next time, remember that becoming a great communicator is so important because it leads to greater impact, influence, and income. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.